Okay, good morning and welcome. We're excited to have a guest speaker here this morning with us, Michael Hugos. He is the author, speaker, award-winning CIO and principal at Center for Systems Innovation, and we're thrilled to have him this morning for a few minutes and hear a little bit about his work and his expertise. So, Mike, good morning and welcome this morning.
Well, Russ, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate that, and we're excited. And this was actually initiated by a student, and that's great, and we get to benefit by that. And so, maybe just to begin with, if you take just a minute and tell us just kind of a snippet about your background, your interest, your passion, and the work that you do.
Well, sure. I tell people that actually my undergraduate degree was in architecture, and I was enamored of the great architects like Frank Lloyd Wright and how they always seemed to be Renaissance people. They integrated all these different kinds of sciences and social studies, such as they would be structural engineers, they would be artists, designers, sculptors, economists, etc. And I came to Chicago originally to work at a big architectural firm here called Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. And somehow or other, I wound up in the group that started doing computer modeling, first for structural calculations, and then we started drawing 3D renderings of the buildings. And this was back way before people really had the kind of software that we have today. So we coded a lot of that stuff by hand. And somehow I never looked back. I like to say that I got into computers because it seemed to be what was happening, and I thought a lot of the people who were doing it were too narrow-minded. So almost out of self-defense, I said, I need to learn about this. Most recently, I did, so I started out as a programmer, worked my way up through the ranks. I was the CIO for the company that delivered all the paper cups to all the Starbucks stores in the country, and in that process, I certainly learned a lot about supply chains because they were a demanding customer, and I had about 5,000 stores. Often you had to visit those stores, twice a week was normal, sometimes 3 times a week. And the service standards were high, as they had a right to be. And I think that in that process, I learned stuff that now, in my present position, I've been able to incorporate into a number of the projects that I'm working on.
Great. So that experience that you have, and now you're able to share some of those principles learned to others of us involved in the world of business. And maybe if you would kind of explain to those that haven't seen the model, the continuum, the efficiency, responsiveness, and how we kind of focus on different parts of that at different times, and how we can bring both of those together.
Yeah. The whole thing with efficiency, and certainly I'm not saying efficiency is bad. Efficiency is good. But 100 years ago, when industrial mass markets were really just kicking into full gear, it was all about efficiency because, in effect, demand was unlimited. You could never make enough cars to satisfy demand. You could never make enough pots and pans and ironing boards and drill presses because there was such demand. So business focused on organizing their means of production to be as efficient as possible. Somewhere in the last 30 years, certainly, a lot of what we've been going through now, as the industrial model spread from the Western countries to around the globe, now we have tremendous productive capacity everywhere. It's almost like products hunt us. We no longer go shopping. Products come shopping for customers. And what I learned, especially working with the Starbucks people, was that I was the CIO, and everyone is very impressed with that. And then they go, but wait, I was the CIO of a national distribution cooperative, not a national corporation, which meant that those weren't branch offices. They were owners, and owners were not interested, certainly in me, spending a lot of money on computer systems when they would really rather have that money rebated back to them. So what has started to happen, well, we had to differentiate ourselves. we could not be as efficient as a wholly owned corporation, because in a co-op there is duplication of facilities. Sometimes we'd have member companies in the same city that would be, competing against each other for local business, and then we'd have to get them to cooperate on the national accounts. So we really start to hit on this notion of responsiveness. If we could be so responsive that we could make a paper cup from our company, and it was a company called Network Services Company, then we had a chance. Because if it got into purely a price war, we were going to lose. So we started doing all sorts of things. I obviously spent a lot of time at Starbucks coffee shops, as did others in the sales and customer service and distribution organizations, and we looked at all the things that we could do to make a paper cup and all the other cleaning supplies and other stuff that we sold them more useful, more responsive to the way they did business. And the way everyone is doing business now is changing. It's evolving practically, every quarter. So what we found was you could wrap any product, and I'll use the paper cup. Talk about a humble product. You can wrap any product with a blanket, a tailored blanket of value-added services that respond specifically to the customer who is using them. And if you do a good job and you keep evolving that blanket of services as their business evolves, here's the big question. Could we get an extra 2 to 4%? And the answer turned out to be yes. Now, it wasn't with everybody. It was only with people where our products were mission critical. So by that I mean we also tried to sell a lot of cleaning supplies and food service disposables to the big car companies. And they used a lot of that stuff, and they all had cafeterias at their plants, etc. But it wasn't mission critical. If they ran out of cups, they didn't close the factory. Whereas with Starbucks, if they ran out of cups, they closed the store. So as long as we were right there with them, they never ran out of cups. And we did all sorts of things, like we would pre-process the invoices we sent to them and incorporate their own GL codes so that they would take those invoices, we formatted them in exactly the format that their ERP system wanted. They could import it directly. It would automatically disperse all those charges to the proper GL codes, because every store runs as its own independent business, so there was a certain amount of complexity in the accounting. We made all of those things real easy. And in return, they did pay us 2% more on the cups. And they knew it. It wasn't as if they didn't know. But they obviously valued the service. And I think that was a big eye-opener for us, is that responsiveness. Now, and again, now you look around, you look at mobile phones. I mean, do people buy iPhones because they're the cheapest phones? No. Do people buy, you name it, cars? How many people, a great new car these days costs what? About $16,000 maybe even a little less? How many people drive around in cars that they paid $40 or more for? And it's because we want what we want. I mean, it's not that we're silly or frivolous. Maybe we are, but we want what we want, and if we can afford it, we pay it. Mm-hmm. So those are the concepts that I think businesses really need to start to think about now. Is nobody wants to pay a zillion bucks, but people will certainly pay an extra few percent to get something that really fits their lifestyle, fits their needs, fits their desires. And if we don't seize on those opportunities, we'll find it extremely difficult to make money just by being efficient.
Mm-hmm. And that's awesome. And the phrase business agility, yes. What are some of the obstacles or challenges or hurdles that prevent small business and large businesses from being more agile?
Well, there is the famous quote that everyone says, although we've always heard it, we never hear it in a respectable context, but it's that quote, and that quote goes, "But that's the way we've always done it." Mm-hmm. Or there's a variation called, "That's the way we do it around here, ... and then unsaid is, "And if you don't like it, you can hit the road." And that is part of the human condition. We all get used to doing things a certain way. It's just that time has definitely speeded up. The rate of change we can all feel. It is definitely speeding up. And some days you wonder, for heaven's sakes, when's it going to slow down? And I don't have any idea when it might slow down. And so agility, I really think, starts with a frame of mind, and then from there it gets into technology and procedures. And when people start to talk about agile, a lot of what we hear right now is people thinking, well, it just means doing the same old thing faster. And nothing could be further from the truth, because just speeding up the same old business model is not going to be worth the effort required to do that.
Mm-hmm. I know some of my students have been interested in gamification and enterprise games, and what is that, and how can that be involved in teaching some of these principles of efficiency and responsiveness to the students of the world that will be the future business leaders?
Well, I think that there's something about games that is very engaging. A good game, you start to play it, and you look up, and hours have gone by. In the gamer world, that is known as flow. You know, when you're challenged, you're engaged, you get completely drawn in, you enter that state known as flow, and the time just goes by. The time flies. I think that has an enormous potential to increase the effectiveness of learning. And there's so much to learn these days. And if we can find ways to combine serious learning with an engaging experience that triggers that state called flow, there is already a phrase called serious games. And the military, for one, is all over serious games. I was at a big military. In the military, they call it simulation. In the video world, we call it games. In the business world, we're not doing any of it. But in the military world, there was a big, in Orlando, first week of December, called ITSEC, IITSEC, which is one of those incredible military acronyms. But you can Google it and look it up and see. They are all over games. And when it comes to training, they are using simulation, and we're talking, very lifelike simulation, in a way that is, they train everything from driving a tank to small arms tactics. And it's because as we inevitably have to start ratcheting down the amount of cash that we're pouring into the military, it is a lot more effective to train soldiers in a simulation environment up to a certain level, and then of course the real world is the ultimate teacher. But in the gaming world, there's something known as leveling up. And until you level up to a certain spot, having people ram around in real tanks and fire off really expensive ammunition is a very expensive way to train people. So why not train them instead in simulators? There was one event there where two jet fighter pilots, one was in Orlando, the other one was out in an Air Force base in, I think it was Nevada, were flying simulators and dogfighting with each other, and they could see each other on their screens in real time, but both of them were sitting on the ground. And they were doing, the whole thing. That kind of training can be applied both in education as well as in business, and I think that it's a huge opportunity, and obviously, my newest book, Enterprise Games, is all about that.
So then the tie of the simulation, the gamification, back to the model, efficiency, responsiveness, allows us to accelerate that learning curve, more effectively learn these principles of efficiency and responsiveness?
It does do that, as well as, and let me answer in two parts. The first part is yes, it will accelerate your learning, and then the second part is, as you start to draw your company's customers and your company's suppliers into a game-like business operating model, there is a level of responsiveness based on that kind of real-time communication and collaboration that I believe is going to be one of the major drivers of prosperity in this century. So let me go back to the first part about increased learning. When you start to, there's something about games where you learn both intellectually and on an intuitive level, or you could call it street smarts. There's something about, you get a sense of the way, a game is a complex system, unless it's just a really simple-minded thing. But often, video games are pretty good models of complex systems. And they have these patterns that moment to moment you might not see. But as you play them, you begin to get a feel, however you want to describe it. I would call it street smarts. And when you are learning both intellectually and at that intuitive street smart level, then you are really learning. There's an old saying in the training biz, and it goes like this: tell me and I'll forget, show me and I'll remember, involve me and I will learn. And that's what games can do, involve people. So now we take another leap, and there's a case study in my Enterprise Games book where one holiday season with Starbucks, it was the year 2004, we were negotiating for a new 3-year contract, and they suddenly upped the level of performance that they wanted from us. And in particular, the holiday seasons are known as the red cup seasons, because all of a sudden you're getting your coffee in a red cup with that holiday's theme printed on it. And the Starbucks people are very precise about how they want to run their business. And when our warehouses would run out of red cups, we had to start delivering the white cups during the holiday season. Woo, did we get into trouble? So the whole issue there was, how do we move the red cups around the country, try to not let them build up in one place and run out in another place, and then at the end of the season, use them all up, because you cannot use the same red cups next year because there will be a different holiday theme. What we start to do, and I would say that one of the most powerful elements of a game is real-time or near real-time feedback, so that everyone can see what's going on. In prior years, we always wanted to, deliver the highest levels of, I think most people want to do the best job they can. Most companies want to deliver the highest levels of service to their customers. But there's a problem when they don't know what's going on. There's that problem known as being treated like a mushroom. Does that, you know what it's like to be treated like a mushroom? It means you're being kept in the dark and fed BS, right? So if you can see what's going on yourself, instead of waiting around for somebody higher up to tell you what to do, then what starts to happen, and you see this in these massively multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft or EVE Online, what you start to see is people will self-organize. If people have a common goal, and most of us, certainly in business, we have some pretty common goals. If they know what the rules of the game are, and again, in business, we have a service contract. Those were the rules of the game. And then if we have feedback, and that's often what is missing, is we don't have any feedback. So what I did was I introduced feedback in a very simple way. We start out by just every night I would refresh a big central database that contained just a handful of information about we were the distributors. Then there was a bunch of manufacturers like Solo Cup and Georgia Pacific and other people that made holiday printed items. And then there was some 5,000 stores. So what we started to do was we would track, if you were a store, we wanted to know what you have on hand, what is your usage projection just for the coming week, because, beyond a week, certainly in the holiday season, who the heck knows. And then if you were a distributor, one of the regional warehouses, we wanted to know, what do you have on hand, what do you have on order, and how much have you been delivering just in the last few days? And then if you're a factory, we want to know how much do you have on hand, what are you manufacturing, and what are you planning to make? We update that every night, and then we let everyone come to our website, and I just we put some simple online reporting that everyone could look at. And then if they want to further analyze the numbers, they could download the whole thing as a spreadsheet. And then what we began doing was every other day having conference calls. And typically in the past, as the season progressed, those calls would become more heated, argumentative, defensive, a lot of excuses and finger-pointing, of course, which never really made anybody do very well or very happy. All of a sudden, and it's corny, and yet it is true, the other thing started to happen. When everyone could see what was going on, we reached decisions better and quicker. And some people have said, well, that's crazy. That's like decision-making by committee. But think about it. It's not, because we weren't bureaucrats. And we felt time pressure to act, which is another game concept. And we all had a common goal. Even though we had different agendas, we were separate companies. But what we started to see was everyone would look at their own numbers right away, make sure that they were right. And we had hundreds of eyes on the numbers, so we didn't have the need for all of these complicated black box algorithms that would supposedly data mine through all that data and find the problems. And they did sometimes, and they didn't other times. Well, here was an example, and it brought it home so clearly to me, of the combination of computing power to give me the data and show me the data in a timely manner, and then that thing called human street smarts. You know, we all knew our businesses. We were interested in doing a good job. We had timely data. And just on conference calls, we began to collaborate. And then when you have conference calls and you're all looking at the same data, not your own individual, slightly different versions of the data, we got that kind of collaborative, creative response. By Starbucks' own estimate, they told us in years past there had been something like 6% excess inventory. That year, and of course we got our new 3-year contract, and going forward, in the very first year, we had saved them, we had cut excess inventory by more than 50%, saved them more than $400,000 on excess inventory that would otherwise have to be written off. And they said, well, gee, let's start doing this all the time. Let's not just do it during the holiday seasons. Let's do this to roll out all the new products. So after that, I said, yep, games work. And I didn't use the word game when we talked about it because, you know, in business, people get kind of funny. You say the word game, and I am over 50, so I will include myself in this observation. Folks over 50 in business, when you say the word game, often think you must be kidding, or they think you must be some kind of slacker or goof-off, and you immediately lose their interest and respect. So I don't say game, I say interactive simulation. But when I am talking to people, you know, certainly 30 and younger, I say game, and they start to go, huh? You can see their eyes kind of perk up, huh? And then I start to explain what we're talking about right now, and they're into it. And I've also noticed when I say the word game in military circles, no problem. They understand because they're doing it. They're using it. This is serious stuff. And business now is that third party that needs to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Mike, that's very helpful to me, and I think to our listeners, to see the tie and the relationship between enterprise games and business agility, and then back to, as we began, the efficiency responsiveness scale. That's very helpful. I appreciate that explanation. Maybe if we could, just in parting, Mike, what kind of skills do we as business owners, do we as students need, and what should we be watching for as we look to the business landscape that approaches us so rapidly and changes so rapidly? Kind of some short takeaways, what to be aware of, how to equip ourselves and be prepared for this constantly changing business landscape.
I would say that we are already well into the merging of social media, video games, and business IT. And a lot of business folks will say, well, what are you talking about? Oh, we don't do any of that. No, that's not going to happen. And au contraire, it is already happening. The whole social media explosion of the last 10 years is only accelerating. It's not going away. And guess what? If you want to be where your customers are, you as a business need to have a presence on social media. And here's another thing to remember. That doesn't mean talking at people. It doesn't mean pushing advertisements out. That's the old 20th century media model when media was always one way. The thing about social media and video games, I believe, are a further evolution of social media. They're two-way. They're real-time, and they're two-way. So that leads right into what we've been talking about as far as responsiveness. And what people really need to get good at in business is collaboration. And that's, again, a big shift because, we're used to may the best man win, which still has its place in certain situations. But when people are being individually rewarded and individually promoted, it tends to create a competitive instead of a collaborative environment. I think that most things in business now are too complex for a single person, even a real smart single person, to figure out. And when you can get a group of people with a common goal and complementary skills to focus on something, you will get what I like to say consistently competent and sometimes brilliant results. So skills for business are about effective collaboration, and what business owners need to start to think about is, I realize you can't promote a whole group of people, but you can certainly create bonus and incentive structures that reward teams, not individuals. And that way you're going to start to motivate people. You're going to give them, the business sanction blessing as well as the motivation to start really collaborating. And those companies that figure out how to master this evolving, it changes as we speak, so it scares us at times. But social media, think of social media as what touches your customers. That's how you're going to start communicating with your customers, and you have to get past the old advertising days and start to think about how do we engage people. Gamification has been used initially, and I believe we're only in the very beginning stages of that, as a way, it's a fairly simple way, often somewhat transparent and somewhat silly at times, way of just sort of rewarding people with points and badges if they interact with you on your website. It can go a lot farther, and the Starbucks Red Cup system that I talked about in enterprise games is an example. We're into a world where collaboration is probably going to be the dominant mode of working. Responsiveness to continuous unpredictable change is going to be the continuous requirement. Being efficient at producing something that nobody wants anymore is certainly not going to be a winning solution. And I hate to say it, but I think that the younger generation gets this. I think that the younger generation understands, in a way, more than we do, because they're used to this sort of stuff. They look at it and I'll go into this and they'll look at me and they go, "Oh yeah, sure," as if, "Hey, what's the matter with you? How come you didn't figure that out already?" So that's my takeaway on that.
That's great. Mike, what a treat. What for myself and my listeners, those that will have access to this for now and down the road. The principles are timeless. As you said, the business landscape will be changing, but my observation from your insight, the principles, and that's the exciting thing, can apply even in the midst of change. So we're grateful to have your valuable time and your input and your insight, and we wish you the best with the work that you do as you spread these principles to the businesses can benefit by using. So thanks a million for your time this morning and the opportunity that we have to visit.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.